Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming onto the show today. For those people that don't know who you are, can you tell me who you are and what do you do?
Martini, lovely to see you. I'm Paul Flynn. I'm the owner and founder of Harbour London and Orchestrate Health, which are two one patient at a time treatment services based here in London.
And what does that mean to be a one patient at a time? Because that's not usual, is it?
No, it's not. So if you look at the typical treatment landscape, people either go into a facility like a psychiatric hospital or a clinic, or they might be seen online and they'll be with other people. With us, we create bespoke programs for the needs of that particular patient. And I'd say we're pretty unique in the UK and certainly the most experienced at doing that.
There's a few people we know in common, and when I ever speak to them, they say, Paul is a great business leader. So I'm really curious, what do I need to understand about you to know how you got to where you are today as a founder within healthcare?
Well, I'm clearly very good at kind of giving that impression to those guys, and I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. I suppose before coming into work in mental health, I had another life. And I worked in the recruitment industry for 25 years. I was fortunate to work with some great people, built a company, which was an international recruitment company, and we sold it in 2015. So what I'd say is the experience of working in that field, in developing teams and creating a very much values-orientated environment, I think it's held me in good stead. But I think they're often saying is, he's done something before he does this, and I think that's true. But business is something I've always been interested in, certainly when I was a kid. I was always interested in it, and I still remain very deeply passionate. I always love to see how people are putting together the strategy and the vision. Even with yourselves and your own business, I think it's been really interesting how it's starting to take shape. So that's very much what I think they're talking about there.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, as a founder, now 25 years in recruitment, but also as a kid, were there any stories as a kid where you did something like entrepreneurial, maybe something different compared to the other kids at school even?
Well, I think the funny thing is, so I grew up in the Midlands and I went to a state school, and they used to get these vouchers for the Financial Times.
Yes.
And I used to collect them.
Why is that?
And I was about 12. So I would go up to my news agents and get it every week. And I'd go into school with it. And often people would take it off me and give me a good whack with it. But my interest in, I was the guy who was interested in that from an early age. So I think a lot of people were heavily influenced by Thatcherism and that monetarist economic policy that was taking shape. And I think the 1980s in Britain, people forget, was a time of real hardship. There was over 3 million people unemployed. But there was also a change in conversation about opportunity. And I think that was something that definitely resonated with me.
And what was that first opportunity you saw that you decided to take in this world of sort of entrepreneurship, being a founder? I'm so curious to hear.
I think the big risk for me was a guy who had never. I think I'd been to London once, but moving to London to go to university when I was 18, and then eventually staying there and backing myself. I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But the reality is, recruitment gave me an environment and a vehicle to be a good salesperson, essentially. And eventually, after working for some other organisations, I partnered up with some people, and we set our own business up. So that was the real risk. I suppose it was a risk because I didn't have a steady salary coming in. Prior to that, I'd been on a healthy salary with benefits, and I had 6 to 9 months of no salary at all. So that was for me that was me taking a big risk. Absolutely. And I think it's proved to be quite a good one in the end.
I guess, what did you learn for that risk? Because I think it's quite a good founder story. Like 9 months, no salary, that's a tough one. Most people would probably give in.
Yeah, I learned I don't want to work for anyone else again.
Why is that?
Because I saw that I wanted to benefit from my own actions. And I actually thought I could cultivate an organisation that was better than the ones that I'd worked in before. And I think even today, I still couldn't work for anybody else. I like the idea of being able to create something where we have great people working together. We've got an aligned mission, and I think that's the key for me. I like creating businesses. I think the challenge sometimes in the past has been I've probably tried to take on too many at once, but I know my limits now. I think I'm a lot more self-aware as I've got older. That's one of the things about getting older. It kind of makes you aware of your energy levels. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
And so when it comes to the recruitment business, that was 25 years. Can you share sort of how you built the business from start to then selling it?
Yeah, we started in a office in Piccadilly.
Yeah.
We used to joke there was 5 of us and a rat because that's how filthy the place was.
Yeah.
And we worked very hard, often 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the compound effect of that led to us being able to buy a property, add more heads count, move to another property, add more head count. And we were primarily a organically growing business. We didn't bring that many people in from outside, and we had a very distinct culture. The other thing is we were one of the first recruitment companies in the UK that would place people in other countries, for instance. So we used to do more business in Germany, France, and the Benelux region than we did in the UK. But we used to do it all from London. And then as time went on, we opened an office in Germany and in the US. And we moved to different sectors. We started out in IT, we moved over to oil and gas. And I think what we were very good at is spotting where the opportunity lies. And I think when we sold the company in 2015, I think if we'd have stayed and continued, we'd have probably seen what was next and grown even more in the States. But I think one of the things I've learned is you've got to have a great team of people around you, and you've got to be able to understand and be pragmatic about what you're good at and what others are, and know to kind of step back and let people step forward. And I think we were very good at that. So
this advice about building a great team, it's definitely something I think a lot of founders say. But what does that actually mean to you? So how do you take that philosophy within your team? Is there anything specific that you could share with, say, a 20-year-old founder that's looking to start their business? What does it mean what tips could you give to them to build a great team?
The key to, I think one of the most important things is you are not, people often talk about a family. You're not a family. Right? In a family, you won't fire somebody. In a business, you will, and you'll have to make very tough decisions. What you can do, though, is build a business where you either like the people that you work with, or you respect what they bring to the table. And sometimes there'll be people around the table that you might not necessarily have a friendship with, but you respect them and you see their value and the inherent need to keep them bought in. So I think that's a really important thing, is to make sure that you choose people who are aligned with what you're trying to achieve. If you have a business partner, that's slightly different. And what I'd say is, if you choose a business partner, you need to make sure that you really are heavily aligned and understand there's going to be times over that journey where your energy levels for both of you are going to dip from time to time, and one's going to need to support the other. But I think that's a really important piece. You've got to get people that you can spend a lot of time around. The other thing is, this is just my personal opinion, hard work is absolutely critical, and a number of real basics, getting the job done, sometimes working outside of the scope of your role, being open to feedback and being able to accept it, learn from it and move on. I think a lot of the successful businesses I've seen, there is evidence within them of either they catch a wave of a great market and then they don't sustain it, or there's organisations that are constantly evolving and people that are constantly learning. For me, 6 years ago, I had no qualifications in the addictions and mental health space. If I didn't get one, then for me, my own credibility was at risk. I had no doubt about that, and it was really important to get that. Do I offer the same as a doctor who is trained in addictions and practices? Absolutely not. I do not. I don't do that. But what I have got is now nearly 10 years experience of the trials and tribulations of running a number of mental health businesses and going from a position whereby we were losing a lot of money to one where we're making money. And I suppose if you look at certain measured, we would be regarded now as a successful company. Will that continue? The intention is there. And if we do that, then I'm hoping we're going to continue to thrive.
Well, Well, it's interesting because you said you sold the business. Why did you sell the business and then move into this world of mental health? That's a huge change.
Sold the business because somebody came along, made an offer. It was one of those offers which was like, you'd be foolish not to take it.
Yeah.
So we did that. There was no real intention to move into this space at all. It's not that I didn't know I would come into this field. I knew something would come along further on down the track. And I invest. I've backed other companies as well. There's still a recruitment interest there. But this has kind of evolved in many ways. And the idea of the one person or one patient at a time approach is not my idea.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose in many ways it's been around for hundreds of years, but from within the scope of what we were trying to do, a number of Swiss-based organisations were doing it. We thought, we'll have a go at that, we can do this. We failed abysmally a lot and learnt from that. And I'd say the real kind of change for us was in those post-pandemic years where there'd been some change in personnel. We would really start to build our reputation, and I spent a lot more time out there talking to people. I think in the years post-lockdown, certainly the first 18 months, I met everyone. I was out there trying to learn about them, and we got into a position whereby we are what we call downward referrers or downstream referrers. So we will get a lot of inquiries about often a range of things from eating disorders to addictions to mental health, that they can't access our service for financial reasons. So what you want to make sure you do is you ensure that they get a level of support. And that's been really good. So when we talk about going to different conferences or knowing different people, I make it my interest to know who's good, who's going to take care of an inquiry we pass them. And hopefully, I think through that there's some karma that gets kind of developed. Right? I think so. And for us, we're never looking for anything financial in return. We're not comfortable with that. But what we want to make sure is people are going to be cared for and supported, often in their most difficult time. And that's key.
So you've mentioned there's some failures and some lessons. Is there anything that you could share about those?
I think at times you've got to make sure you've got the right personnel in place. And I think even though I'm a recruitment guy, it doesn't mean I get all recruitment right all the time. I just don't. And there have been a number of hires over the years where it hasn't worked out, and that's, I think sometimes you can be also in business with people and they're not the right people to be in business with. I think because of my personality, I think I typically get buy-in, but it doesn't necessarily mean people have got the expertise to meet what they perceive is my expectations of them. And that's been a problem in the past, no doubt about it. And so that's one. I think at times spending money on things that just yield no return. I think marketing's a really interesting conversation. And I think even over the 9 years or so I've been involved with my mental health services, what one spends money on at the beginning and what we spend money on now is completely different. And you've got to have your eye on what are you going to get a return on. Can you put a number on that? It's very important for me. But I think even what you do now, content development is moved forward at such a pace over the last couple of years. But I'd also would say for a service like ours, it's a key strand. People want to know what these guys are all about. What differentiates them, and I think this kind of medium is really useful for that. So, there's been a number of failings on that level. I think the key thing is you've got to fail, and I think people who go through life or have experienced people who are, A star all the way, when they hit a bump, then they struggle. And for me, I am one resilient person. No doubt about that. And I think if you look at many of the people within our senior management team, they're the same. They have those characteristics as well. I think it's important.
The resilience one.
Yeah, resilience is key.
Well, I found out recently, you've created what the Times newspaper has called one of the most exclusive rehabs on planet Earth.
Yeah.
How have you gone about building that? Because you haven't just built one business, you've actually run two businesses, right? So can you share...
It's an interesting strapline, that one, isn't it, Martini? The most exclusive rehabs or treatment centres on earth. And why are they exclusive? Well, they're exclusive in many ways because of the price point, and we have to call that out for what it is. You can only access it really if you've got access to significant private capital, and there is an increasing number of people globally who have got that. And for us as a service, we have been able to treat people from, I think, about 40 different countries we worked out recently over the years. And though we're based here and we deliver here, it's been able to have that really multi-dimensional, with multidisciplinary team. And the great thing about London is, culturally, it's an amazing city. I think from a medical perspective, there's not much you can't do here and you can't get access to quickly. So our service architecture, so use that word that you like, service architecture is there, and we've got a lot of resource that we can draw on. Yeah. But what you've also got is you've got a health and you've got a safety framework in their place from the statutory perspective that keeps people safe. That's the reality, and keeps organisations, I believe, honest as well. So if you're going to be charging what we charge, you've got to be upfront about it. It's about value, and it's about, can you demonstrate that you offer a higher perceived value than Hospital X in central London, or treatment centre Y in the Midlands. And I think for us, we're very clear, you're not comparing the same things. With us, you're coming to a one patient at a time service where you're getting your own team, you're getting your own treatment plan that's designed specifically for you. And there are a couple of imitators here, and you can acknowledge that. I love a bit of competition. But the reality is, for me, I try and focus on, are we improving? Are we looking at things? So for us, are we looking at things like outcome measures? Are we looking at the kind of diversity in our team? Yeah, they're the kind of things that we're doing. So it's been a lot of hard work to get to where we are, but I'm sure it's fair to say we are one of the most exclusive treatment services in the world.
Absolutely. And what was the thinking about setting up two businesses then to do this?
Yeah, so Orchestrate Health, which is essentially a community mental health service, came around in lockdown. So the idea of being able, if people weren't comfortable going into Harbour, we had council then, coming into Harbour, which they weren't, and the reality is many people couldn't even come into the UK, so you lost access to that referral pathway. But we could put nurses in, we could get psychiatrists to visit, we could put therapists online, so you were able to offer these blended hybrid programs that picked up a range of, often at that time, escalating mental health conditions. Within the NHS, they have what we call home treatment teams, which essentially deliver that service, but en masse. Okay. Our aim is to deliver something similar to that, but much more high touch. So for instance, a case manager in the NHS might have 80 clients, case manager in our service might have 5. So it gives you a sense of that intensity and support, but essentially putting someone in the home, we can do whatever needs to be done.
But I guess the question as well then is, they're two very different business models. So are you crazy or a genius for doing that?
I'm definitely not a genius, I can tell you that now. But what I can tell you is, the similarities within the service are the resource. So human capital is at the heart of everything. Making sure you've got the right resources, availability, and also their affability as well. They've got to make sure that they can connect with people. And that there's a real similarity in those talent pools that you work with. So it's often about deploying that human capital quickly and effectively in the right circumstances. Yeah. So I don't think that in some ways they're not that different, certainly when it comes to operationalising the services, but it can lead to a lot more work, there's no doubt about that.
So I was curious because you've talked about business a lot, and it's clear as you said, from young, you've been very interested into business. What is your philosophy about business, and how do you think about growing a business?
So I have been primarily in my life somebody who either backs myself financially. Some people say I'm a moron for doing that. All right, and I get that sometimes. So with Harbour, this was an organisation at one stage was looking at 800,000, nearly £1 million worth of debt, all paid out of my own pocket to get it to a certain level, and that level at the time was a loss-making business. So there was very little sign of that evolving. That has flipped, and we're in a very, very good position. But the reality is, when it comes to philosophy, is for me, I've got to be in something that doesn't necessarily feel like work or a chore. And for me, it has to be able to add value. Now, I know when I sit down with people, whether within my family or whether I'm at a dinner party, and someone asks me what I do, I'm very proud of what I do. And I know that I've been able, with the support of a wonderful group of people, but also engaged clients, be able to make a difference. Been able to make a difference to people's lives. So a couple of months ago, I was having quite a tough day about something. Out of the blue, a message came through from someone, and that person shared something they'd done that day. And if you'd imagine what this person was like 18 months before, it was never going to happen. It just never going to happen. And that there's an element of that helps sustain you for a period of time. So my business philosophy is, I know I'm a business person, and I have to have commercial conversations with people. I'm also a human being with feelings, and I care deeply. And I think at times it's very hard to separate the two, but I think people can often see that you can be both. And I think the way we operate as a service is, if it was all about the money, I wouldn't be doing this, because I know I can turn my skills to something else if I had to. But why would I? Because I'm in a role working with people that I really enjoy working with, helping their patients get better and families to grow and incredible things to materialise. Doesn't really get any better than that. You're living a dream life. You're living a great life, in as much as, I'm not saying this is like an impact role, but the reality is you are a facilitator of change in people. You are, I know I am. And I'm very honoured to be able to do that. And I take that responsibility very seriously. So actually sometimes, if it doesn't go, when you work in mental health, it doesn't go, this is one of the things people won't tell you, it doesn't go well all the while. Of course it doesn't. You're dealing with volatility, you're dealing with complexity. So when things don't go well, you've also got to make sure that you can bring the empathy and the consideration and that deep level of kindness to people, because they're going to need that. And sometimes you've got to bring a level of candour as well, because you might not necessarily have performed as well as you needed to. And we're like any other organisation, and anyone who tells you otherwise, I think, particularly in this space, then I doubt that's the case.
So imagine coming from recruitment to healthcare, two different industries. Yeah. What's been your biggest learning moving into the healthcare industry?
What the similarity is, we are dealing with people. So I remember someone saying to me that recruiters are just behind estate agents in how they are hated by people. And then I remember saying, well, that might be the case, but if you look at the most significant decisions people make in their lives, one is get married and have children. But those decisions as well are also influenced by where you live and what you do for a living. So they might be, often, caricatured and criticised, but they're quite significant roles to be in. Now, healthcare is, what are you doing? Is you're looking to safeguard people's well-being, and you're looking to offer them the opportunity to improve their life. People now talk about extending their life, so I'm sure you've probably spoken to a few people about longevity.
The biohackers.
Biohackers, longevity. I had a session myself with someone today, and life extension is key. That's what everyone's talking about. But equally so with that comes other considerations. If you're going to live to 120, how are you going to have the money to live to 120? Who's going to look after you? You're going to look after yourself? Have you put enough aside? Are you going to does that mean you're going to work to 90? So there's so many, it's so kind of multi-dimensional kind of conversations to be had here.
Yeah.
But for me, I always zone in on, I love people. I love the context. I love the stories that kind of take place. And I think that curiosity that comes with that is really important. And for me, you can't manufacture that. It's kind of there really.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm very fortunate to be able to have that.
I mean, I do find within the world of healthcare, everyone is so authentically themselves,
Yeah.
and most often than not, it comes from a love for patient care,
Yeah.
wanting to be sort of altruistic and help patients, which is it's what's amazing about the healthcare industry. So I wonder, if you were to advise a 20-year-old founder who wanted to, let's say, set up a clinic or maybe even health tech, what would you recommend them to do? And what advice would you have?
I suppose the interesting thing is, I think what one has to look at, are you looking to build a business that is going to be profitable? What are you prepared to sacrifice? Because that's the things that people don't talk about. A lot of companies raise money, and you know, often I will speak to people who want money for me to invest in them, and they will talk about it's valued at this, and we're going to exit it hundreds of millions further on down the line.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's really interesting. But I have to be clear: is have you got the experience to pull this off? Just having the will is not enough. People, you know, they've got the drive, and these are going to make it. Not enough. Are you able to deal with so many competing demands on your time, and also are you able to deliver yourself as an individual? So if someone is a 20-year-old founder, the first thing I'm going to ask is, okay, what are you bringing? You're bringing capital, because what is your base level expertise? What is it you are? And sometimes it might be somebody who, let's just for argument's sake, say they're 30.
Yeah.
So they may be a nurse, they might be a doctor, they might be a therapist, and they've got some great idea. And it's about, right, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to be able to provide for my family. I want to be able to build something I'm proud of. Great. What does that look like? And that visualization is really important. And I think at times being able to visualize and work backwards on how to get there is a very, very important exercise. And that's something I think they should do. And I think the other thing is as well is to invite critical feedback, constructive criticism on their business or their strategy. You know, I know as a business person, I've written literally, you know, hundreds of business plans, countless forecasts, and just literally the only person who ever read them is like me once or twice. But they look great.
Yeah.
The reality is, I think you've got to be held accountable. A good finance person is really useful, because what they do is they keep you honest. They might try and constrain you sometimes, but if you're the kind of person who believes in what you're doing, you will be able to articulate why that additional investment needs to be made, or why you needed to give a discount, or why you needed to go into a different market. And that's very much the ebb and flow of the relationship with the finance person. And I think that's really important.
Sounds like you've had a lot of experience dealing with finance.
I value them, I really do, because a person like me can very often go, oh, I've got a great idea, let's go and do bang, 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 bang. And they'll go, whoa, hang on a minute. And they will look at it and they'll go, you need to look at this. And I had this precise experience within the last 3 months. And I went, no, we're not doing it. Because what I saw in this particular distraction, because that's what it would have been, is it had taken too much bandwidth from me, and also led to a need for a capital injection that I'd rather put in the services that we're involved in already to amplify their growth, because they're already on that growth cycle.
It's very interesting. I wonder, you mentioned earlier about marketing, especially as a healthcare clinic. It's a very difficult space now, because I think the supply of clinics have really gone up, and usually that might mean advertising. You know, most clinics are spending a lot of money on ads, for example. What's your approach towards marketing a healthcare clinic in London?
So I've got someone who, you know her, Janine McNabb.
Yes.
So she is somebody who has far more marketing experience than I have, far more. But she's also someone that I can have a conversation with and bring my knowledge around it to bear, and we can have robust conversations. I think the important thing, particularly in the mental health space, I genuinely believe new entrants are probably not estimating the size of the market correctly. Where there is opportunity, we know in NDD services, neurodevelopmental services, there's a lot of work there. There's a massive shortage of clinicians, but also a massive waiting list in the NHS.
That's like the ADHD assessments.
ADHD, ASD. So there is a real market there, there's no doubt about that. But I think when you're looking at developing new clinics, also in developed treatment centres or even organisations that might mirror what we're doing, you've got to have a real marketing mix that acknowledges the importance of developing really deep relationships with the people who will either refer to you or that will amplify you. And they're not the same thing sometimes.
Can you explain?
Because what you might have is someone who is very well connected, but you know what, they're not necessarily going to get people who are ultra high net worth along, but what they will do within their own network, they'll know a lot of people and they'll go, do you know about these guys? And you know, we had a case on Friday from somebody who the inquiry was referred by another psychiatrist to a liver doctor. He'd never heard of us before. Now, he rang us, made a referral, we assessed, should be admitted tomorrow. Now, that's a very interesting, there's no advertising that would have got to that person.
Yeah.
Now, would clinical outreach work? Yes, it does. I think that's a really important approach. I think for a service like ours, being able to evidence what outcomes look like, why people should come to Harbour, what differentiates us, that's really important. But I wouldn't say there are many organisations out there doing anything super innovative, certainly in the addiction space. Yeah. But I think that's also constrained by the changes Google made years ago around ad spend. So I think if you've been around a long time and you've got great SEO links, then you're pretty well set up.
Understood. Curious to then, what sort of skills have served you best as a healthcare CEO?
I would say listening and spending time not really trying to sell our proposition, but understanding what the landscape looks like. I'm really clear with regards to both Harbour and Orchestrate Health, where we sit within that mental health or wellness landscape internationally. I know exactly where we sit, but I also spend a lot of time trying to understand where the others sit as well, and being able to have time really understanding what works for them. So for instance, the last week I've spoke to somebody who specialises in peptide therapy. I've spoken to people who own a wilderness campaign, wilderness program. So I spend my time not necessarily visiting loads of places, but just engaging and just being really trying to be open, nothing to hide. Our approach is so tailored to the needs of the individual that every single case is different. So is that easy to mirror, or is it easy for other organisations to adopt? I'm not sure it is. What I will say is we have an unbelievable network, both of people to work on our team, but also people who can refer into us as well. And I think, what served me well is just being open, considerate, and just trying to build a reputation around that. And I think it's been very helpful.
And is this, when you say building that network and being open and considerate and listening, is that going to the conferences, meeting people, building those relationships in person to, I guess, actually like show what Harbour's about?
I go to the conferences. I've been going to the conferences for a while, some more than others. But I actually do more work, not in the, I'd say the shadows. It makes me sound like a CIA operative, which is nonsense. But I am as much, you're going to find me having coffees with people or going for dinner with people, and I'll often start with, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
How can I help? And inevitably what I find is people often end up helping me as well. And I've got some great, you've met some of these people like Nick Hazel and Joe Morse. These are people who incredibly kind, very considerate, and they go out their way to help a lot of people. Yeah. And there are a number of people like that. And I think if I can do a bit of what they do, then I think it serves me well, to be fair.
So just going on to now the treatment centre, can you describe what actually is a mental health treatment provider?
So a mental health treatment provider comes in a number of different shapes and sizes, I suppose, in many ways. I think typically, if you look at, we call it the step care model for mental health. So if you look at how people access mental health, they might access it directly from a GP. The GP might prescribe antidepressants or refer them to talking therapies. They might go to a clinic, and it might be a psychiatric assessment, which leads to a treatment plan or clinical care plan with a therapist and a psychiatrist prescribing medication. But it can also be where the acuity is high, and they might be in a kind of multi-bed facility like a Priory or a Nightingale Hospital, where there will be other patients in there. There may be nursing cover because of the acuity and the need to really monitor your psychiatric risk. And then you've got treatment centres, more typically known as addiction treatment centres, which have undoubtedly now widened their scope of service delivery to pick up mental health, but also elements of neurodiversity, also eating disorders. Then you've also got what I call the more specialist providers. So for eating disorders, you've got places like the ORI. For compulsive sexual disorders, you might have someone like Innisfree. And there are a number of different organisations that pick up that subspeciality within, say, addictions or mental health. I'd say where Harbour comes in is where you might need luxury, you might need discretion, you might need a comprehensive team of people working around you, where it's eyes on 24 hours, not necessarily because it's a highly acute case, but there's a need that, a belief that with an intensive multidisciplinary approach, we will get quicker change in the person. And I think that tends to be the case from what we've seen. Orchestrate Health, it can actually be an adjunctive approach to, say, a psychiatric hospital. If someone's in hospital, they want to leave, but they still need a nurse. They need someone to come and visit them, and they need a psychiatrist to monitor the medication, and we can pick up that. So that's, in a potted history, that is what it looks like.
Everybody.
There are a couple of other elements to it, and the other elements are wellness, and there are elements of that wellness landscape which is now picking up different components, particularly around things like symptom relief. So the use of things like breath work and mindfulness for emotional regulation, supplementation, as well, or the use of things like hyperbaric oxygen chambers. These are all really interesting approaches. And I think if you look at the menu of services that you need to offer people, that's growing. People are becoming incredibly sophisticated in their, certainly in their wants, whether it's their needs, that's to be determined by robust assessment. But I do think it's a very interesting landscape.
I guess, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about mental health treatment providers?
I think if I was to think of what the misconception is, I think first and foremost, it's that they've got all the answers, because they haven't. Also the other things as well, they are sometimes only as good as where the patient is on their journey. To give you an example, I've known people who've been in other treatment centres before, including other one patient at a time providers. By the time they've come to us, they're ready. Their readiness to change is increased significantly beyond what their first and second admissions elsewhere were. Does that make us the best treatment provider when they get a great outcome? I don't believe it does. actually. I think sometimes you could be in a fortunate place, but no doubt it's been the other way sometimes as well. So I think there's no world's best that I can guarantee, but people market themselves as the world's, you said one of the most exclusive treatment centres. Yeah, there's truth to that. World's best, says who? Who's scoring this? What, awards? Has an award been given out for that one? If there's an award given out for it, I'd still question it.
Definitely. There's so many things. It's been so interesting to hear you speak from the business side, the marketing side, you as like a founder going from recruitment all the way to the mental health world. I've got the last few questions for you then, is where do you see the future of this industry of mental health being for someone that works in this space?
How far do you want to go? So one of the things I was talking to someone the other day is, I know places like Japan, they're looking at the role of robotics now, robots in the home.
Yeah.
They've got an ageing population, and the number of carers to provide support, they're going to run out of them. That's the reality. So what will the role of robotics be like in the provision of care further on down the line? Certainly for neurodegenerative conditions, I think will probably be a part to play. Undoubtedly, what we're seeing at the moment is the increasing use of AI.
Yeah.
It hasn't even started yet. So people are using obviously different scribes, ID. Yes. They're using different tools to assist them in facilitating care planning. We're at the absolute beginning of this, and how that's going to play out is going to be very interesting.
What excites you the most about the future of mental health?
What excites me the most is I think technology will have an increasing part to play. And I also think people will start integrating the metrics that are used for measuring physical health. So we've been talking today about heart rate variability. Yeah, it's a really interesting measure, and I think that will be something, unless something else comes along, that's going to be quite significant, particularly in being able to demonstrate how people can reduce their essentially their age or their pace of aging. Yeah. And I think things like that, I hope they become mainstream, because what that will then lead to is quite a significant improvement in people's health. What concerns me, devices concern me. Access to social media is problematic. Yeah. And I think the idea of regulating that is going to be very, very difficult, because I think it's the genie is out the lamp on that one, I think.
Yeah, and we're still just seeing the impact on what social media has. I mean, I think it's a very common thing now in the industry to know we're in a loneliness epidemic. Yeah. I've heard Gen Z is the loneliest ever generation to walk the planet. Yeah. Which is crazy, and I think a lot of that is probably to do with social media. Of someone that's been in business now for quite a long time, within the healthcare space.
I'm old, aren't you?
No, not at all. Experienced. What's something that you know now that you would want to tell yourself when you were younger, when you were just starting out in your career in life?
Probably wouldn't try too many things at once. That's what I would do. And I think just because it's a good idea, and everybody tells you it's a good idea, doesn't mean it's going to be successful. I think you've got to be able to stress test things, but essentially, whether you call yourself an entrepreneur or a business person or whatever, an ideas person, you're going to have to make the call whether you're going to go with it. It's going to boil down to your decision at the end of the day. But for me, don't try too many things. I think for me, and I think this has been a good lesson, when I've seen people raise too much money, they have a problem, and it's the money. What they do is they burn through it, and what they don't do is they don't understand the resilience that you develop through having to not have money, and having to often innovate and come up with a different solution, because you just haven't got the means to kind of invest in that $100,000 on an app or a new patient records flow or whatever it is. Yeah. And I think that's really important. Be mindful of people who offer too much money to you, because usually it's going to be a millstone around your neck, and I think that's a real that's a lesson I've heeded, and I think that's an important one.
No, that's a very interesting one, because I think it's very common in the entrepreneur world, where it's like, oh, look how much money I've raised, and it's celebrated. but then a lot of times they haven't actually made a profit yet, which is very interesting. So the last question then is as a founder, how do you balance family time and running a business?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. So I think the important thing is, so I was talking to someone the other day and they said, do you think you have good self-awareness? And I think I do. And I'm also, I believe I'm open to feedback if I'm not behaving in a way that's going to be beneficial to either me or the people around me. But you've got to have, we're in the business of caring, and if it turns to compulsive helping, then you're going to have a real fall down, right? You're going to have real issues. So for me, fortunately, I'm in recovery. I've got another range of different coping strategies that come with that are incredibly helpful. Yeah. So I would say one of the key things is being able to have perspective and make time for family and loved ones. Really important.
It's very hard to make the time next.
It is. But you know what? At the end of the day, you've got to, because for me, life is family is an important component of my life, and it always has been. So, give you an example. My clinic is 15 minutes by train, and probably another 7 or 8 minutes at the other end. So I'm not spending, 2.5, 3 hours a day travelling. Yeah. I'm also someone who I don't spend a lot of time networking overseas because, frankly, I can't be bothered. I know that's probably not the answer people would expect, but I have only so much bandwidth, and it will impact my family time. Yeah. But Monday to Friday, I do whatever it takes to get the job done. And then at the weekends, when you own it, you own a business. You're always available. That's the reality. But what tends to happen is I don't hear from anyone over the weekends. And
you just say no phone,
no, it's on my phone. If an inquiry comes through, I will deal with it. I will refer people on. I will take the inquiry through to assessment if need be. But again, it's also about being able to talk within the family about. That's what, I'm someone who's been fortunate enough that the material elements of my life are nice. So, and that comes with a level of sacrifice. Anyone who tells you otherwise, there will be a small minority of people who might luck it, right? But most people who live in nice houses, drive nice cars and doing things, have had to work for it. And that's what it takes. And you've really got to have some wading through treacle sometimes to get there. Yeah. And that's just the reality of starting and growing businesses.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, thank you so much for this conversation and coming on to Good Morning Harley Street. Lovely. I think the thing that I learned, the thing that sort of I picked up the most was when you talked about the resilience of being a founder and really sort of just seeing and experiencing that, and it's an important fact. Thank you so much.
Lovely to see you, mate.
Lovely to see you. Thank you. Thank you for watching Good Morning Harley Street.
If you are a clinician looking to build your thought leadership, check us out on LinkedIn, Angelova and Martini Sue. And if you're a clinic looking for support with your marketing or with your video assets or your sales assets, then check us out on the same platforms.